Thank you very much, Right Honorable. Good luck up here. Very illuminating points you have raised again in response to you're being recalled to intervene in this conversation. Once again, thanks a lot. I believe that in the Q&A session, the participants could have many more questions and indeed comments to make on what you have proposed, along, of course, with what His Royal Highness had also indicated. Let's now invite Ms. M.M. Okon, who is the Executive Secretary of Keba Catch Women Development and Resource Center. She has extensive experience in mobilizing communities and women who are impacted by oil exploration and production. Ms. M.M. Okon, sorry, we've kept you on. We had a lot of challenges, but certainly it's been worth our effort and time listening to the very illuminating issues that have been articulated by the panelists. So, Ms. M.M. Okon, 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate Dr. Tive for that passionate and energetic presentation of the keynote speech. As you said, my organization have had similar experience conducting similar research in 4 states of the Niger Delta on the utilization of the 13% derivation. We conducted the research in Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, Delta, and Rivers. And based on that experience, I will take my intervention from Dr. Tive's last statement, enlightened leadership and pressure from below, making the difference. Actually, perception from community members is that in the absence of a legally established agency in most of these oil-producing states to handle the implementation of the 13% derivation fund, that the federal government should rather pay the money directly to communities. And many people also have issues with money being paid directly to communities. But taking from what Dr. Tive said, pressure from below, we can actually make a difference. How do we generate the pressure from below? We need to build the power of grassroots community members and grassroots groups to begin to engage with the different state governments to ensure that the 13% derivation fund is being expended to benefit community members, particularly the women. If we look at the oil-bearing and impacted communities, as has been explained by the other speakers, we realize that people still live in poverty. They don't have access to social amenities. There is no potable water, no electricity supply, no quality good road network, no healthcare delivery system that is working, apart from the private clinic. In fact, even most of the private clinics are being located in urban centers. So community members still have to find their way from where they are to the urban centers where they can access healthcare services. The dominant perception by community members also revealed that they have the impression that successful state administration have grossly mismanaged the 13% derivation fund. There is no transparency, there is no accountability, and no evidence of productive utilization. This is the reason why we all have the responsibility to build the consciousness that rather than sit down and complain, the people at the grassroots need to build power through capacity building, through awareness raising, through intensive campaigns and organizing at the community level. We need to begin to identify key stakeholders and also generate community development plans. If communities develop their community development plans, it will be easy for them to positively participate in their own development process. And that way, the process will be inclusive. The women will be included in the planning and spending of the derivation fund, the youth will be included, persons with disability will be included, farmers group will be included, all artisan groups will be included. And how do we develop the community development plans? There is need for participatory needs assessment conducted in these communities. This will lead us through a process where community needs are prioritized, and then a development framework is produced for the community, which means that women groups will have to identify their needs and prioritize it. Youth groups will have to identify their needs and prioritize it. Each organized groups within the community will identify their needs, and then there will be a forum where all these needs are collected and harmonized, and then a ranking procedure is taking place so that communities can prioritize these needs and then have a plan. And this plan should be endorsed not only by the chiefs, but by the women leaders, the youth leaders, and other key stakeholders within the community. It doesn't end there. That is when the pressure is generated from below, the community development plan would serve as a tool to relevant agencies that can actually provide and take action to implement those needs in the community. In a situation where we don't have strategic needs of community being identified and also being budgeted for, it will be difficult for communities to sit down and expect the state government to just go and implement whatever project they want to implement. The experience with constituency projects is that representatives will go to community and just locate a project without due consultation of community members to find out whether that project is actually what the community needs, and also to ensure that community participates in the project. When communities participate in the process of identifying their needs and implementation, it is easy for such projects to be sustained and maintained. There are projects in communities that are just there like monuments. Though we say there are no water infrastructure, but you go to communities and you have water projects that water are not flowing from. You have monopumps, you have all kinds of projects, but these projects are not serving the interests of community members. Why? Because there was no participatory process undertaken when those projects were identified, when those projects were implemented. So community members don't have a sense of belonging in such projects. And the people who locate those projects in such communities don't also endeavor to reach out to community members to ensure that there is due involvement of communities. So the same thing can apply to the derivation fund. State governments are in custody of the funds, and they use the funds for whatever they use it for. So nobody has the information, nobody is participating in the process of identifying projects that will benefit communities. If a particular community needs educational facilities, and then you just go and site a market without discussing with the people, and you feel, oh, the women need market or the community need market, and you build the market structure and you go away, nobody will use that market because they think it is your own project. So we have to change from the top-down approach to the bottom-up approach to ensure that there is proper inclusion of community members in identifying and implementing projects. Then we also need to build capacity on advocacy. It's actually difficult for community members to access government institutions and government officials. Somebody or a group needs to be able to build their capacity and create that access for community members. Community members will sit down and grumble. They don't do this, they don't do that. But there have to be that demand and supply flow. Communities need to demand and then ensure that government also live up to their responsibilities. It's because community voices are lacking where they are needed. That is why representatives and state governors are at liberty to use the money for purposes which they are not meant for. They use it to prosecute election, they use it to do all kinds of things rather than the services that they are supposed to provide for community members. So they've got to be that intensive campaign. They've got to be that engagement. They've got to be increased voices of the people, particularly the voices of the women, the voices of other vulnerable groups, the voices of persons with disability. Most times, community development programs are designed. They don't actually address the needs and interests of persons with disability. So we just build school buildings without taking into consideration that they could be children that cannot properly access those buildings. They could be children that are impaired. That is because their interest was not taken into consideration when such projects were designed. Women's interests most times are also not included. So that means gender is an appropriate, gender is a requirement in planning interventions and also in the disbursement and utilization of the 13% derivation fund, because everybody's interests have to be taken into consideration. Then community members also need to utilize the media. They've got to be that access to information and access to the media. That is one way where their voices can be heard. That is another strategy where that pressure from below can be felt by the people at the top. That is one way they can be able to influence decisions and also begin to attract the attention of their representatives and the attention of the government. We need to have access to media. Apart from the mainstream media, we also need to build the capacity of community members on how to use the social media to reach out to the key stakeholders. And that means the civil society organizations have a lot of work to do in this regard. Building power of community members, building consciousness of community members, ensuring that community members are more proactive. At certain times, CSOs make the mistake of always speaking for communities. Apart from speaking for communities and trying to project their voices, communities need to have the capacity and capability of speaking for themselves. That is another way of giving them power. We need to identify community members that can articulate their issues and present their issues, and also ensure that a platform is created for community members to interact with appropriate government institutions and government officials to ensure that their needs and their interests are properly communicated to the appropriate quarters. Government officials also need to know that they are not occupying offices for their own interests or for only the interests of those who are close to them. They need to understand the fact that they have a constituency, and regular interaction and interface between them and their constituencies is very necessary in the process of utilizing the funds.
Ms. Okon,
have I exhausted my time?
Actually, I gave you an extra minute and a half. So I gave you an extra minute and a half. So maybe get 30 seconds now to wrap up, and then we'll get into the Q&A very quickly.
Okay, I'm almost done. What I'm actually saying is that there is need to intensify pressure from the grassroots. In Quebec-Casa, we are building a grassroots women's movement that can actually be interfacing with government institutions, government officials, the corporations, and other key stakeholders to ensure that women's voices and women's interests are properly addressed by government programs and projects. Let me end there. I will respond to questions when they are raised.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Okon, for the very valuable points that you have raised and the proposals you have made with regard to the efficient and effective utilization of the 13% derivation funds for oil producing communities. Thank you very much. I think the points are all noted. We're getting to the Q&A now. Already, if you look at your chart, you will see some comments there, but we'll still leave the floor open for your questions or for your comments. But I'm quite keen on reading this from Donald Ide. Well, not the first paragraph. The first paragraph was talking about NDDC. Concern is not strictly with NDDC now, but the second paragraph of his intervention, that is Donald Ide, he writes that you can see that on the right panel of your screen. That's where you have the chart. How is the 13% derivation supposed to be employed by politicians and hangers-on who are not development professionals. So that's an indirect way of saying, look, get development professionals involved in all of this. And Okon talks about getting community development plans as a basis for the pressure from below. We also have some other comments that have come in, which said, this one is from Bede Izwogu. It says, why shouldn't a community development committee or a community development trust be set up with support from an oversight of a dedicated representative of government and NGO to manage their share of the oil derivation allocation, thereby allowing their development and destiny to be in their own hands. Bede Izwogu here calling for community development trusts for the oil funds coming in on the basis of 13%. Now, we have another one here from Wilson Ejeku. Says, when you look at the 13% derivation that ought to go to the communities, which by inference doesn't, how can we get the states and federal governments to increase this percentage and ensure that the funds are not mismanaged, but used to create interventions that positively impact the larger number of people in the oil communities? So those are some of the things I want to read out in the meantime, but I believe that you have your own comments and questions for our three panelists who have made very useful suggestions in the course of this dialogue. So the floor is open for those who haven't sent in their charts. I'm just trying to read some of the latest. Where there's an appreciation here from Canada for Ms. Okon. Thank you very much for your very informative talk. I heard you well. Anti-MM, is there a success story anywhere in the Niger Delta that we can learn from and build on? In other words, beyond lamentations, are there some examples of what has been done right and therefore can be emulated elsewhere in the Niger Delta? So, more questions and comments. We're going to have about 10 minutes for 10 minutes or less for this before we get into the second session, which is on solid minerals production as well as impact on at least six communities on the 6 geopolitical zones. All right, so if you want to, just unmute yourself and make your contribution. All right, okay, I have some Q&A. That's part of what I've just read. That's from Olubukola Ademola Adeleye. I says, is there any success story anywhere in the Niger Delta that we can learn from and build on how communities effectively engage the government to get their developmental needs met? That's one of the questions there. I've just read that. I have another one here, a chart. Well, this is appreciation. So if we get, maybe we can get the panelists to respond, or indeed make additional contributions on the basis of what we have read out.
Hello, can I go ahead?
His Royal Highness Pahura appears to be coming on now, so we'll take His Royal Highness.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, there are some progress made in some states of the transition, like in Edo State. For example, there is a ministerial committee where the communities are also involved, the Ministry of Oil and Gas is involved, and the executive government is involved. And we need periodically, every 3 months, we need to bring in the issues and how to solve the issues. We bring the issues from the communities, represent them, each of the communities is represented, and the local government are represented in that committee. We present the issues to the government, and the government address them and send this issue to the Oil and Gas Commission. I think this is the model every state can do. Hello? Hello?
Your Royal Highness, it looks like you're having some interference.
Hello? Hello?
Hello? All right.
I said we have
Hello.
some.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Hello. Yeah. Who is trying to join the conversation now? Please kindly introduce yourself and your affiliation. All right, sorry, there's a great deal of discussion there. We have to gain on time. Ms. Emma Code, would you like to respond to some of the issues raised? I think we have
Yes.
clarity
Yes,
from connection.
I would like to speak to the issue of community development trust and sharing a success story. On the issue of community development trust, the companies in the implementation of their global memorandum of understanding, particularly Shell, are using the structure of community development trust or community trust funds to implement their corporate social responsibility project. In that instance, they form a board within the community with different representatives who identify community needs, and then money is disbursed to that trust, and they use it to implement the project. These, however, are without their own challenges. They have their challenges because in some of those communities, there are complaints that the corporations impose members on community members in the community trust fund. But at least it provides that process of collective identification of projects and also collective implementation of project through their representation. This can also be applied because, as I said, shared earlier, most of our respondents said there is need for federal government to adopt that approach and form boards at the community level. Community members will appoint their representative into the board, and then the funds can be disbursed directly through those community management boards. Let me share success story.
Just before you get into the success story, please, just before you get into the success story, why would you require the federal government to supervise a trust fund at the community level, or even at the local level, if not state level?
Yes, I'm sharing the perception of community members. And when I was presenting, I also noted that a lot of people see challenges in this implementation when federal government would disburse money directly to communities, because people feel that there would be a lot of conflict and fighting and killings, because it might be challenging for federal government to directly supervise and enforce. But what we need to also understand is that between the state government and the community, we have the local government. So how do we, because the local government is the closest to the community, so there should be a review of the process of just releasing these funds to state government. And it is difficult for community members to assess the state government to begin to ask questions, particularly in those instances where there is no legally established agencies to manage the funds. Who do you ask? Is it the state governor? And also that is why I said we, through our project of financing for development, we are building the capacity of community members to monitor state government projects in their communities. And that is where I'm going to identify two success stories, one in Delta State, where community people monitor a road project in their communities, and they write a letter to the state ministry that they think is directly responsible for that road project. And also we created a platform where this community representative interface with the media. Sometime after that media interface, one of the persons in the group got a call from a member of the State House of Assembly telling her that they should stay off the project, that the project is directly under his control. So it means that the action of the community members actually reached somebody who was responsible to handle that project. And he was telling them, forget about that project, concentrate on health project and education project. And the girl said, well, I am privileged to receive this call from a honorable member of the State House of Assembly, but sir, thank you, you call. That is the interest of the community members. So if you are the one directly responsible for the project, ensure that the contractor return to site. And as we speak, The contractor had returned to site and they had commenced implementation of that road project. There's another success story in Rivers State as regards a project of a local government area. After we had a stakeholder dialogue and media interaction, and community members, community monitors presented the report from their field work. The project in one of the local governments in Rivers State, contractors also returned to site. So that pressure from below is necessary. And if civil society intensify efforts of building the power of grassroots groups, there will definitely be a change.
All right, Emma Okon, thank you very much for your response. Maybe we'll take one or two other comments, but I've just tried to go through the Q&A that we have here. Well, this is a comment from Yusufu Dadem. Says the leaders we elect or appoint to manage our resources will determine how the resources are managed. That's one from Yusufu Dadem. That's a point I'd like to put across. I mean, Dr. Otiba Ibuzo may also wish to pitch in here, along, of course, with the other panelists. How do we avoid the many instances of overlapping interventions that often then don't get properly executed? Typical example. Federal government itself has its ROEA, that's the Rural Electrification Agency, which ran into some challenges sometime in the past. So ROEA says, look, we're going to electrify some rural areas. And they go there with their projects. State government will tell you, oh, we want to electrify some rural communities. They go there with their project. NDDC will also come and say, we want to electrify some rural communities. They also pretend to go to that particular location. And now 13% derivation will say, oh, in that particular community, we're also going there to install rural electrification. At the end, what you find, you have a number of electric poles and cables that sometimes get vandalized, but people never get light. So how do we overcome this overlapping interventions that are inefficient and often poorly executed?
Okay. You want me to intervene, Kingsley?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think the first point to note is that there are mechanisms already on ground for such to happen. For instance, in every sector, whether the electricity sector, the education sector, the health sector, there is a national council on that particular sector that is supposed to have meetings and, look at projects together. Then, of course, the NDDC is expected to work with the state governments, to avoid this duplication. But what you have in reality is that all of these are not working. So if all of this work and they do what Okon suggested, needs assessment before the projects are done, then you eliminate all of this. The problem is really that some people will sit in their offices and determine what project should go to which places. So there are times that you see that place already have a street light. They will allocate another street light because the people are allocating it from the office. But if you do need assessment, and then all these collaborative agencies are able to collaborate, then you will completely eliminate the need for all these duplications that we see.
Right, thank you very much, Dr. Otiba Ibuzo. From our panelists, one or two comments so that we can close this session and bring in the second session. They've been itching to come on. We know that we have eaten deeply into their time.
Okay, should I go ahead? Hello.
Hello, yes, we can hear you, but I can also see His Royal Highness Bab Pawura, if His Royal Highness is still there, along with Honorable Goodluck up here. Maybe just give us your closing thoughts. Unmute your mic to intervene, yes.
Thank you very much. Are you hearing me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Much has been said, the people about this derivation. Like I said, the derivation, I think it's too small. It should increase to 50%. And the comprehensive audit, social audit, environmental audit, economic audit of the whole community to be done. Without this, you cannot just go and implement projects. You need to ascertain the enormity of the problem on ground. I don't know the enormity of the problem on ground through this comprehensive audit. Because you can go and begin to design projects, begin to conceptualize projects, begin to implement projects. Without that, if you just go in and begin to design and implement projects, the people will not own the project because it's not coming from there. Like MM said, the bottom-up approach. The people are not involved. They don't know fair about them. And the enormity of the project is not known. So there should be a baseline information. So this audit report, the environmental audit report, the social audit report, the economic audit, and the health audit report of all the communities in the Niger Delta. And don't forget, I also suggested that the federal government is paying the whole community as a ecological debt. And the federal government will take that debt. It is 50 billion to each of the $50 billion to each of the whole communities in the Niger Delta. And we have over 3,000 communities. I know the amount. They are not the size of the amount the federal government is paying the people. It's over trillions of dollars for over 6 decades of oil exploration and exploitation. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness. And Honorable Opia, your closing thoughts, very briefly. Can we mute the host here? Could you mute His Royal Highness since it's... All right. Honorable Opia, can we get your closing thoughts very briefly?
It's still muted.
Honorable Opia, unmute and then let's get your closing thoughts. All right, we appear not to have Honorable Opia there, but still we would like to appreciate his participation in the conversation segments of this session. Honorable Goodluck Opia, former member of the House of Representatives and also former member of the Imo House of Assembly. He was there when the Imo House set up its own oil Community Development Commission, ISOPADEC. So we'd like to appreciate you for being part of our conversation this morning. We also would like to thank His Royal Highness, Babs Pawuru, is president of the Host Community Network. And also a deep thanks to Ms. Okon, who's Executive Director, Executive Secretary of Keba Catch, for your insights, as well as the participants who sent in their comments and questions to this particular segment. Once again, that does it for us now in the first part of this webinar. Coming up next will be the session on impact of mining, will be the impact on mining, which will be moderated by Nimo Bassi. Nimo Bassi is an architect, he's a writer, he's a prolific commentator on public affairs, The Guardian, OPEC pages of old. He's currently director of health of Mother Earth Foundation, an environmentalist and human rights activist. He will moderate the session. You will have Nimo Bassi. Sorry, we have eaten deeply into your time, but I understand you're going to have like 40 minutes, early bets, this webinar. You will be joined by 3 panelists, Honorable Mrs. Janet Adebi, who is President of Women in Mining Nigeria. She's a former member of the House of Representatives. We also have Mr. Opi Ojeka, who is Director, Artisanal Mining, the Federal Ministry of Mines and Steel Development. And last but not the least, Mrs. Fuluke Ademokun, who is Executive Director at Joke Aisat Afolabi Foundation. So, Nemo Basi, please over to you. As I said, let's see if we can wrap up your session in 40 minutes.
Thank you so much, Kingsley Osada. It's so good to see you and to listen to you, and thank you for piloting the affairs so far, despite all the technical difficulties. I want to also thank Neiti for putting this together. This is an extremely important conversation, and the Ford Foundation for supporting, and of course, Dr. Tive for giving us such a wonderful, wonderful keynote address. I enjoyed the last panel. The comments of Right Honorable comment from Comrade Babs Paodu, who is now a Royal Highness, also MMO Kun of Kabet Kache Women Development Center. So we go into our panel. I will request the technical crew to please mute everyone who is not speaking, who is not formally invited to speak. I thank Waziri Adio for hosting this meeting today. So as you've already heard, we have 3 speakers on this. I will also make a comment at the end. I want us to make use of the time as effectively as we can. So we're going to be discussing about mining. Mining is an issue that is gaining traction in the country. It has a long history, but with the acceptance of crude oil and gas as major revenue sources, every other thing got neglected, agriculture, mining. But mining didn't go totally under the radar, because even though it wasn't organized in a very official way and government wasn't focused on getting revenue from there, mining was going on, and the impacts were multiplying over the time. You know that there was a time where the tin mines of Jos were top of the range in the country, the coal mines of Enugu, those were just abandoned, but the impacts were not remediated. So I guess we're going to be looking at the book that has been released concerning the impacts of mining is very telling indeed. The photographs in the publication, heartbreaking, but that's the reality of Nigeria. So I'm going to go straight to invite the panelists one after the other in the order we listed in the program. So the first speaker I would invite on the panel is Honorable Mrs. Janet Adeyemi, who is the President of Women in Mining, Nigeria. I really expect to hear a lot about what are the things that are limiting the unequal access of women to opportunities and influence in please take the floor.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Are you hearing me?
Yes, good morning.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
We're hearing you. Good morning, Honorable.
Are you hearing me?
We're hearing you.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
I'm Janet, and once again, I'm excited to be here, but I might switch off my video because of the erratic network this morning. I want to really thank Neiti for inviting me, and having listened to the goodwill message from Doctor and the panelist, Mrs. Okon. I want to thank you so much for your submission. So I won't bore you with all the minerals we have. We have all those things on the literature. So my topic today is addressing the socio-economic and environmental challenges.
Hello, you are lost. We can't hear you. I can't hear.
Being planned by Chinese and by local people. So mining itself, you have 8 critical steps, which are prospecting, exploration to defining the extent of the value of ore, conducting mine planning, conducting a feasibility studies, development to create access, exploitation, and reclamation. All this entire process involves people, involves resources. And in all this, where mining takes place, you find men and women there. So if these processes are not properly managed, naturally it will impact the environment, it will impact the people. So, and you find out that the various mining processes, which are recognized, are about 5. That is mining from the surface, using underground methods, using recovery methods through boreholes, using dredging, and recently asteroid mining, that is mining from the sky. However, you find out that all these processes, no matter what, we are still at the very rudimentary level in Nigeria, where we do surface mining and we don't even have access to equipment. We use hoes, cutlasses, jiggers to mine. So what do we expect? We expect a devastated environment. People are mining without properly being equipped. And that is where the women find themselves. Women are there doing one thing or the other. They provide services. They are wives. They are career professionals. So these categories of people, different things impact them differently. Women who are professionals are being discriminated against because of the patriarchal system. Women who are working in the sector, work either as laborers who get peanuts as pay and they are not protected. Some of them are working as equal investors looking for gemstones or even industrial minerals, but because of their limited understanding of what they are doing, they are often even being exploited. They don't have access to the market. Then you look at what are the consequences of all this. The health of the men, of the women, of the children, of the youth are all affected because when you mine negatively, I like the way Dr. Tibe put it, mining can bring money, but it's equally the fastest way to poverty because when your downtime on being ill is much, when you're exposed to sicknesses and affliction all the time, you can't be productive as a nation. So then you now want to look at the critical, because where I really want to dwell is I'm going to rush my slide and go to mining and gender. I said, gender can be a she or a he, because when you talk of gender, men get jittery. It depends on where the equilibrium is tilting. Right now, women are most affected. In future, it could be men. So when you talk of gender, it can be man, it can be woman. And you find that the women in the sector can be grouped as career professionals, women working in the sector as laborers, consultants, operators, or living in host communities. There's a structural gender inequality within the extractive industries, which continues to undermine women's rights and development potential of the sector. And a failure to engage women will impact the society negatively, because once you leave 50% of your population behind, what do you expect? So women, we have found out that face systemic discrimination, and it's not only in Nigeria, even in advanced countries, even the same Norway we refer to often, if you check their history, you find a period when the whole sector was mascularized with norms, where women were discouraged from going to the sector. So tackling gender inequality within the extractive sector demands a fundamental shift, and we must be sincere to address this shift. And when you talk about gender, now I'm using gender to connect whether man, boy, girl, youth, or anybody. It requires a reshaping of the values, culture, and norms that produce and maintain gender bias within the sector. Given the positive correlation between the increasing gender inequality, the progressive realization of women's rights, and poverty alleviation, the imperative for a new paradigm must be very clear. And so what are the key challenges women face? You find out that critical inaccessibility of capital and financing. When you look at the men too, who are laborers in the field, or men who are mining using diggers, is the same thing. Lack of appropriate technology and machinery is a major issue. Lack of access to information on availability of mining claims. Some of them just go white casting without knowing what they are doing. Extreme difficulty in acquiring mining licenses. This, I think government should look into it. Lack of geological information on the output capacity of their mines, because they don't have the right capacity of staff. They don't have the resources to engage surveyors or geologists or whatever. Then the technical know-how. You know, some of them just go in without any skill, without understanding the method of mining and all that. And mining itself is labor intensive, that's the truth. So a woman can't say because you want to function in a man's something and change who you are. Then unpaid care work at home, again, because whether you like it or in marriage, they say man and woman becomes one. So if a woman is staying behind to take care of the children, what is the man doing? And then when the man comes back from the dirty site with his unclean uniform can contaminate the environment. Prevailing patriarchal ideologies are some of the things. Then we said lack of mentors and role models is a major issue. Then what are the direct impacts of this mining on women? Women can lose their traditional status in any society where mining creates a cash-biased or based economy. Then a transient male workforce can bring increased alcohol, sex workers, and we were in Obajana sometimes, and you'll be surprised at what goes in there in the trailers parked over there. It has become a sex camp. You understand where all manner of things take place because of the disorganization in that environment. Women are not consulted when companies negotiate access to land compensation and all that. Mrs. Okon dealt extensively on that, why there's need, you understand, for a robust framework where everybody is inclusive and the people are well informed. When mining damages the environment, it undermines a woman's ability to provide food and clean water for her family and increase her workload. Compensation and benefits are paid to men on behalf of their families, which they hardly share with their wives. Female mine workers often face discrimination because they are seen as weaker sex. Then some of our key recommendations are this. We said the need for the provision of financing from both public and private sector. Provision of appropriate technology and machinery, very, very important. Institution of a clear information dissemination framework that reaches the grassroots when women claims concession become available. For example, through our association, that can be easily accomplished. The need for training and capacity building initiatives, targeting the women miners to equip them with technical know-how in the sector to avoid the all too common cases of swindling affecting women. The need for market information and establishment of mechanisms that connect women to ready markets. Targeted sensitization of the communities to dispel the patriarchal ideologies that pervade the sector. Formalization and strengthening of women groups. Very, very important because it becomes easy to assess them and to share information with them. Include women groups at negotiation table. Let it not be all men seated at table. Women need to sit down at table, and Okon emphasized it because that is when you know their needs and then they are drawn into that discussion. Promote policies that encourage activation of the local economies of the host communities and laws that insist on ensuring that all procurement for mining companies are by host communities, where a certain percentage is by women. COVID taught us that easily. For people who have their supply chains around them, they still function even during COVID, not necessarily in the mining sector. And now we should start looking at that. Some services should be strictly executed by women. I was in Madagascar, and in the mining company, you find out that their uniforms, their food services generally are provided by women. And their procurement, they make sure they give certain percentages of their procurement to their women-based companies to supply. Women must be included at the negotiation table through all-inclusive framework, through a participation process where all stakeholders are involved, whether youth, women, and others. So you can hear the need of everybody and develop appropriate indicators. Government must ensure equity in the placement of women in decision-making positions, e.g. Miremco, are not seen as doing them favor. Most times when when women are put in position, it's seen as if they are doing them favor. No, I believe that women must be part of it. And if you look at the recent amendment of the bill going on, tactically, you find out that you can still see that the gender is not represented in that bill, because all you said is zonal representation of this, zonal representation of that. And at the end of it, we find that they will all be men. Whereas when I was in National Assembly, when we are coining out the ICRC law, I made sure that all these compositions good, but at least a minimum of 5 must be women. And that is what happens till today. Use of smart technology, robotics, and artificial intelligence in mining is very important. So as we are embracing serious mining, we should start looking at that. Because if you look at Sima mining in Mali, women are there and it's all fully automated. Provision of telecommunications and delivery services, filling of skill gaps, amendment of 2007 Mining Act to reflect gender and host community inclusion is very important. Then I said gender auditing should be taken seriously in the implementation. And let me explain what I mean. Gender auditing in civilized countries of the world now, you find out that mining companies, and that is why they cannot misbehave in their own country. They can come here. When you look at it, you want to see what have they done? What percentage of women are there? What percentage of services have they provided in their community? So it is when that thing is certified, that is what they take with it to Human Rights Commission, who can either pull down their certificates to, or still allow them to continue to mine. And that is where MC, that's mining cadastral office, should be encouraged, to play that role, because they gave the lease, and the 1978 Land Act, you understand, does not confer you the tenancy of your land. It's on lease. So if you misuse my property, I should always be able to withdraw it from you. So I think it's a very important one. Then resource costs must be avoided by ensuring that socio-economics, through value chain development, through well-established sectoral linkages, just TWG meetings. Look at what Norway did. The money they earned from mining, they made sure they plowed it into other sectors. But how do you do this? My conclusions. I said the result of this research, that is, I believe that this is a validation of what they have done, should be used to influence government policy, planning, and actions to address the challenges women, artisanal, and small-scale miners and host communities face. This will also help to position women miners to better contribute to a sector that is critical for Africa's transformation. I said to ensure completion of reclamation or restoring mine, we will start thinking of the issue of introducing a bond to be held escrow until the land is fully reclaimed. Because when we do that, mining companies, like they do in civilized countries, will be very careful. I said there should be a serious sanction against erring companies who degrade mining environments, and the MC Act should be amended to be able to suspend or withdraw any license based on abuse upon verification by Human Rights Commission. The financial audit of a mining company should indicate percentage spent in the host communities, because the local economy of any community should be built up. How much of, when you post you have made 10 billion, how much of that 10 billion have you spent in your host community? Then I said the capacity of the host community should be sufficiently built to be able to engage government, private companies, and civil societies. When their capacities are well built, you can take up anybody, just like Okon said. I said there should be support from government and donor agencies to support NGOs, such as Women in Mining and other CBOs. It is a must to embark on a sex aggregated data. As we sit, my brother, in this country, there's no data anywhere on the mining sector. Go through the literature, and if you want to monitor anything, you must have a sex designated data as pushed by GESI. The GESI plan simply means gender, equality, equity, social inclusion. So these factors, when you accommodate them into your system, you are now able to monitor how many of these people have been addressed. How many of these people, that was why Otivi can quote and say, oh, so millions have been taken out of poverty. How many have you taken out of poverty? It's a continuous thing. You must monitor continuously. But when you make suggestions to this, we are quick to put in projects or programs which nobody is monitoring. So by the time the thing is dying, that's when we know this thing is no longer in existence, because nobody monitors it to know maybe it's being watered, maybe it's alive. The theory of change must be imbibed. The theory of change embraces political will, that's GESI, data culture, social impact, infrastructure, and partnerships. Let me round up. I said, and what is GESI? GESI is looking at data, disaggregated data, analysis, informing policy action, and key performance indicators. By the time we start doing all these things in line with infrastructural development, partnership, social compact, you understand, we'll be surprised of the transformation we will have. And then we will not even be talking of women alone. We are talking of a whole host community, that is vibrant. People will live in rural environments and still enjoy all the facilities they can enjoy in town. So I enjoy that at the end of this day, today, the Neiti, you understand, should make sure this discussion goes beyond this and make sure that there's a real transformation in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Adeyemi. That was excellent, of course, and your presentation is so clear. I don't think I need to summarize any part of it. You made very clear recommendations about finance, about appropriate technology, information, including geophysical information, sensitization, need for training of women miners, formalizing of women groups, gender auditing, inclusive planning, and so many other points. I hope you have your documentation available for Neiti. I'm sure they would love to have it. If you're for participants, you can write your questions at any time in the chat box. You don't have to wait until the end of the session. As you write, if you have a QA box or in the chat box, the panelists will be also looking at those places. They can prepare answers. We're going to go straight to the second speaker on this panel. Is Mr. Opi Ojeka of the Ministry of Mining, so to speak, Ministry of Mineral and Solid Mineral Development, a director there. Please, Mr. Ojeka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nimo Basi, and to all panelists, and especially to Dr. Tivia. I want to say that, Tivia, you've been part and parcel of the mining sector, and I will commend you for your effort in putting up the 2 books that are about to be released. But of course, unfortunately, I do not think either it is me or the ministry have had opportunity to have a look at that document. It would have gone a long way to help us. Notwithstanding, we will look at the issue of the inclusiveness of gender and the host mining community development, the effort of government towards that program. We will all recall that when the realization down on Nigeria that we've been putting all our eggs in one basket, that is over-dependent on resources from oil, was not helping the nation, because the international pricing of the product is beyond the nation. The issue of derivation came on board, and that led to the selection of, or the choosing of, the mining sector as one of the pivotal to now resource the nation. And on that basis, the reform program came up between 2005 and 2006, and government efforts have been positioned to make sure that all that have issues that have been affecting the oil producing communities do not recur in the mining sector. But as one of the panelists said earlier on, yes, of course, environmental issues cropped up, and prior to even the 2006 issues of abandoned mines, mine pits have been littered the nation, and it causes a lot of hazard to both human and animals. In that line, the ministry being focused as an organ of government to drive all inclusiveness and to provide equitable environment for all entrants into mining, had established technical departments and agencies that take care of some of those teething challenging development. You have the Mines Inspectorate that to make sure that the HSC is complied with. The Artisanal Small-Scale Mining Department that look at the issues of formalization, gender mainstreaming, as a provision of extension services, and of course, you know what we call safer mining that will reduce the impact of to health by the mishandling and the misapplication of the minerals mine. The Mines Environmental Compliance Department handles issues of environmental impact, and then the Community Development Agreement. Like my other speakers have said, when we look at the Community Development Plan or Community Development Agreement, that is a program where government is forcing the mining companies to carry out their CSR appropriately. And of course, considering the inclusiveness of all, including the host mining community, leaders of such focus groups are invited to discuss with the company. You talk of the chiefs, you talk of the community elders, you talk of the youth, and then you talk of the women group. They all are given audience, and their contributions are considered in drafting that community development agreement. And of course, there is a misunderstanding which grossly affects the implementation of this program, in view of the fact that whereas the community felt that the moment the company steps in, they are supposed to commence the community development agreement. But the law provides that you allow the company to carry out its exploration. At the point of development of the mine, and then the mining to commence, that is when you begin that you now engage and make sure that the company is responsive to the agreement they have signed with the community. Yeah, that the Senior and small-scale mining department have been driving the issue of formalization and giving everybody and every group, every focus group, the attention and the opportunity to be part of it. We have in records here data on wholly gender-based cooperatives spread across the country. But of course, their daily operations, which is based on individual focus, is a challenge to the growth of those groups. But then, notwithstanding, government has continued to keep its effort steadfastly. The environmental issues being taken care of, and most of the mine-out pits are being reclaimed. Of course, as at 2007, we have a records of over 1,000, high-profile mine sites, abandoned mine pits that have been recorded, and then one after the other, based on the available resources, they are being recovered. Extensively, it is a continuous program, and it will continue to flow until that is addressed. But of course, in the Nigerian Minerals and Mining Act, in the provision there for the contribution of operations to the environmental remediation if they mine out and leave. But of course, it is a fund that is established in the Act, and that fund is on this basis to pick up so that all miners will contribute towards that. And when you fail, the government will hold you responsible. Here, we are looking at the gender mainstreaming issues and the child labor abolition to eradicate child labor in the mine site. Of course, the Mining Act provides that every individual, be it man or woman, are given equal recognition in accessing mining title. Hence, the establishment of the Mining Cadastral Office, specifically focused on title management. And it operates on the basis of first come, first served, and the clause of whether you use it or you lose it. But of course, the general challenge, based on our cultural upbringing that affects women, but of course, through sensitization and extensive awareness creation by government, women are picking up the gauntlet, and many of them are involved in mining activity. They have been encouraged to be bold enough to step up and be investors rather than be manual workers in the field. And at the same time, because of health impact and the stunting of the growth of the children they have, they're being told to keep the children out of this mine site. That effort is ongoing too. I will continue to grow with it. The issue of government responsiveness too to the cry of lack of finance funding to manage mining sites. Of course, we are all aware of the funding habit lodged with BOI that gives everybody equal access to access and see how they develop their investment. For record purposes, I want to tell this panel that if you go in there are more women that have accessed that fund than the male counterparts. Though we look at it that because mining in Nigeria is physically energetic and consuming, but then the women folk are picking up. You will now see that the pioneer gold refiner in this country is a lady, not a man. And the man who picked up after her is still dragging to kick off. But the lady has gone far in completing the installation of the plant. So she's already in the business, and she's a trailblazer, and we will have to encourage her and commend that effort. Equally too, the corporate social responsibility should come in, and then the company should be responsive to their responsibility to the host mining community. Empowerment has been stretched because through sensitization and awareness creation, most of the host mining communities are no more lying fallow. They're picking up and then taking up the challenge to form themselves into cooperative, but either combined as male and female or wholly male and wholly female. And we have them in Houston. Government efforts too, just as they established the petroleum 30% derivative fund for the oil producing communities, have equally come up with a 13% derivation for solid mineral bearing states. Yes, as we speak, because of the level of operation in Nigeria, the contribution of mining to the GDP, yes, which is still floating between 3% and 5%, or even 0.3% and 0.5% to the GDP. We have to say that government has achieved a tremendous increase in that area because the revenue keep growing year in, year out. All right, and then you'll see that the 30% derivation gives equity to all, such that we will not have a discord within the country trying to begin to question the government focus mainly to the oil producing state. Of course, the landscape of the country is endowed, therefore, and you can see the number of persons entering into the business of mining. But of course, all hands must come on deck. The synergy of all agencies of government, even the NGOs and all other stakeholders in the sector are needed to strengthen the focus of government in developing the community and then empowering the youth of the nation. I think at this juncture, I will want to draw our attention to all the available literature that government has enacted in this line. We're looking at the mining policy that was developed in 2008. It's an all-inclusive document. We look at the Minerals and Mining Acts, and equally the Minerals and Mining Regulation. And then, of course, the roadmap for the growth and development of the Nigerian mining industry is that they have all the inclusive program to cater for all the focus group and all other technical teaching challenges that face the sector. Nigeria is a reawakening to the development of the mining sector. We are not yet the mining destination, but working assiduously hard to make sure that Nigeria become a mining destination in the near future. Thank you for this opportunity to express a government effort towards the development of the sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ojeka. You used your time very effectively and you were right on time. 10 minutes, I really appreciate that. And I must say, you represented your ministry very well.
Thank you.
I have only one issue I will take up with you, but that would be after the next speaker. There's something you said that I really wanted to clarify.
I stand by.
Okay, so I will turn it over to Mrs. Foluke Ademoku, who is Executive Coordinator at Joke Ayisat Afulabi Foundation. And she'll be taking us to some of the issues that affect children and youths and talk about the issue of their health, safety, and other matters. Mrs. Ademoku, please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. I also want to say thank you to the organizers and to everyone who is out there, with us. In spite of the fact that we have, we ran out of time, I say, thank you. I think this is a good time to talk about, the issues in the mining sector. It's a good time we are talking about it so we can, capture some of the lessons that we have seen in the oil and gas. And I don't want to go into details of the problems because from the interventions we've had earlier, we can see this has been discussed, in a very deep, manner. Now I'm going to switch up my video with your permission, please, so that I could, for the purpose of.
Sorry, you muted yourself instead.
I'm sorry, I muted instead of the video. Apologies. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the mining sector, has developed a roadmap, for the medium-term national development, plan and also Agenda 2050. And this reflect the principles of the African Union agenda and also the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's a good thing. For us to be talking at this time, just like some of the speakers have said in terms of community participation, I think this is very important to enable stakeholders in this sector to have informed to make informed, decision, to also engage informed, participation. I know that Engineer Adeyemi spoke about data. Even though as I'm talking about children and the youth, I will also say it's important for us to get together as stakeholders to discuss some of these issues, because from the perspective of measurement, in terms of how well we have done, in terms of M&E, coming together help us to be utilization focused. We are not just looking at natural resources now. We are also looking at the human resources, not just in terms of financial rewards, but also in terms of the value that they are adding. And when you talk about youth, you talk about children, you are also talking about women. I look at the policy thrust of the roadmap. There are 9 policy thrusts, but because of time, I'm not going to go into the details. But likely, I would want to reflect on the aspect that talks about building a thriving and sustainable economy. I also want to look at the issue of encouraging agriculture output for food security. I want to look at the issue of insecurity itself, improving security for all, providing access to quality education. If we look at the policy trust, I also think it is important to look at the Child Rights Act, to look at the Child Rights Law in some of these states, the states that have domesticated. And when you're talking about children face the same challenges that adults face, but theirs are more because of vulnerability. Children are dependent on their mothers, and the case of COVID-19 in Nigeria, are pointed to that, because the first child that got this, contracted COVID-19 got it, because the child was a baby, with the mother, and that's just the same thing when you go to the mining, areas. You see children crawling. We have all heard about how children, got exposed to lead materials in Zamfara and some other north, eastern states, and how over 400, children, die. But if we are talking about the policy trust, talking about a sustainable economy, you are also looking at the issue of employment, for instance, for the youth. And this is very important, that rather than focus on unemployment, what can be done to improve employment opportunities for the youth in terms of training, not just employing for paid employment, in terms of providing entrepreneurial skills for the youth to take advantage of employment opportunities within the sector. The agitation that oil mineral areas face are tied most times to financial opportunities. And that's why we have heard so much about resource costs and all that. But we also know that there are opportunities in the economy of mineral production in Nigeria. You hear about companies who want to, who are talking about procurement. What opportunities have we provided for the youth to take advantage of procurement opportunities, of business opportunities, not just employment opportunities? And that comes to the issue of adaptation. Adaptation, that we have some policies that are well-meaning. How can we encourage companies, operators, the artisanal scale, the small scale miners to take advantage of some of these opportunities through policies? How can we encourage companies or operators to promote policies that we encourage equal opportunities in the workplace, that we work against sexual harassment in the workplace, because children are also sexually harassed, they are sexually abused? How do we encourage companies to put out statements on the protection of children, and not just to develop policies, but to ensure that these policies that they have teach, that the policies can bite? That's a strategy that we need to look at in the mining sector, to see how policies are domesticated, are used, leveraged within operation, within organizations and institutions, to ensure that the rights of children are protected, their right to survival, the right of a child to good quality education, the right to dignity, Because sometimes you see children in mining areas, they are, crawling and they are eating, substances that they shouldn't ordinarily get, near, because the infrastructure is not just there for childcare. You see a mother who is bent on making a living, going with an underage child because there's no school, no daycare center, to take those children to. So these are the questions that we need to address in terms of infrastructure, in the mining sector, for children, so that they are adequately, taken care of. The right to leisure, the right to recreation. These are rights that are fundamental, to the well-being of a child. Because in terms of children, you are looking at the protection of their rights. You are also looking at the improvement of their well-being. So what are the infrastructure in place to support the well-being of children within the area? I personally have been engaged in projects in terms of social impact assessment, and sometimes you go to schools, you see like 4 arms of a school. I can see class 1 to 4 in the same classroom with one teacher. How do you expect such a child in remote areas to have access to quality education? It's not just enough to say we have schools. It's not just enough to say we tell mothers, not to bring their children, to the workplace. If they don't bring them to the workplace, where will they keep them? Do you have policy in place? Have we ensured that organizations have policies in place to protect children in working places? Those are the things that we need to look at going forward. In terms of health, the primary health care facility that we have. What is the distance of a health a primary health care center to the mining location, for instance? We've heard today about distance, and I've seen it in terms of my also survey that you don't have access to healthcare for people in the rural areas. Sometimes, most times rather, they depend on traditional, health service providers, and we know the implication of that. So we need also to look at government, all stakeholders working together to finding, to creating a space for health services to thrive in a way that it is affordable, and in a way that is accessible, not just to adults, but also to children, even mothers that are pregnant. What process is in place for antenatal care? What policies do companies or the organizations have in place, to ensure that a mother, a nursing mother, a pregnant woman has access to health care just for the sake of the unborn child, or even of a young and of an infant. So these are discussions that we need, to take forward, to look at how children are protected in terms of environmental pollution. I recognize that there's a duty of care, for people who generate waste. It is your responsibility when you generate waste to ensure that the waste are properly disposed of. I know that the regulations in the DPR, for instance, has that, but these are lessons that the mining sector, can learn in terms of waste generation and waste disposal. I'm talking about waste management generally, so that a child, will not mistake, lead, for instance, for biscuit. So this, are some of the things, and we also need to look at the issue of integration, reinforcement of some of these, policies and actions, programs that promote the protection, of children. What programs are we encouraging? Associations like Women in Mining, organizations, within, the operating areas, even government. What programs, are we, encouraging departments, ministries, to promote for education of children in terms of the youth, in terms of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? Do we have a program in place? Do we encourage, companies to invest in programs, even though they are going to get some tax incentives, for our youth who are in that, sector or in the area? They are encouraged to take up mining, maybe as a profession or as a business. They are encouraged to participate in that, sector, in a way that is meaningful, in a way that is valuable. These are some of the things that I think, we should be looking at without necessarily looking at, the problems that we are facing. Lastly, talking about, policy. I remember at the time I worked, in the oil and gas sector, And as an employee, I was mandated to participate in the Federal Corrupt Practices Act, the FCPA of the US in Nigeria. But I think that there's a gap, that there are acts that ordinarily companies should be encouraged to expose their employees to. Then they will take it serious. If companies are encouraged to organize sessions for child protection, then the issue of abuse will be minimized, if not completely eradicated in the mining sector. These are some of the laws that we have. We need to see policies also to see how we expose operators, either formal or informal, to find a structured way to expose them to some of these laws and policies so that in their own little environment, they can replicate it. And once they replicate it, they will identify champion who helps to drive this process. And once we have awareness, because one thing I've also observed is the issue of awareness. We have laws that are protective of children, but we are not aware. If at any point in time they violate those laws or those policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Demoku. Your presentation on the impacts on children, very well taken, very clear ideas. And it really deepens the conversation because we've been talking about environmental impact assessment and you raised the issue of social impact assessment. The social and economic impacts of mining on communities are really, really very serious. We in the report, we're told about the impact on the economy, how businesses start off around the mine pits. But when you really consider the social impact and the environmental impact, in my opinion, I believe mining could very well be a negative investment. That's my personal opinion. And then I have a comment on before I turn it over, but please put your questions in the chat box. We are about to take, I'm not making any presentation. We're just going to take comments because we've spent a lot of time on, a lot of useful, productive time. I don't need to repeat what others have said already. There's something that Mr. Ojeka said, and I would like him to answer, to respond to my misgiving. He did say that mining companies don't necessarily have to do any community projects until they begin mining. But we do know that exploratory stages are just as sometimes have serious impacts on the environment and on communities. And so why should communities bear the brunt of exploration, of the cutting up of their forests, of their grasslands, and the loss of everything almost just because the companies would only be liable or expected to carry out projects when they have commenced exploitation. Exploitation, they're all damaging to the environment. We've seen the pictures in the book about mining pits in various parts of the country. We know about the mining pits of Jaws that has not been remediated. Now, we've heard also about the need for bonds for corporations. In fact, the Mining Act of 2007 does really make provisions for companies to ensure that there's a deposit, some money set aside, a budget set aside for remediation at the end of mining, because every mining pit has a lifespan. There's no mining pit that's going to last forever. So eventually they're going to leave a hole in the community, a hole in the ground, polluting the rivers, contaminating everything, and the children are there, the workers are there, nobody's really taking care of them. How are we going to ensure that mining, with more emphasis on mining, we're going to have more degradation across the nation? And for Neiti, my question is, you always audit finances. What of the environmental cost? When are we going to have environmental audits of what impact of mining and of oil and gas extraction? Because we need to balance the books. Without the environmental cost, only the economic cost, no social cost, the books are not balanced. There's no transparency. I really would like us to bring in to close that hole, that black hole, so that we can have a truly, truly transparent analysis of the sector. So now I will shut up and go back to my role as moderator. and allow Mr. Ojeka probably to respond to my question. Then
yeah, I am set here. I'm ready here to respond to your question.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
First and foremost, thank you, Nimo, for the perfect job. But of course, I have to correct an impression before I go ahead to explain to you. What I said is this: what is captured in the Nigerian Minerals and Mining Act needs to be fully interpreted to the host mining community to understand what that enactment is stated. Exploration, of course, exploration affects the community, the environment minimally compared to mining open pit. In the country, we carry out open pit mining specifically. Exploration, you are digging and you are drilling. And therefore, if you are drilling, and I tell you, I will continue to vouch to say that the effect on the environment is minimal. And except a miner misapplies his or her title, rather than carrying out extensive exploration, go on to begin to access a small-scale mining license so as to mine a vein. If you are combining that, the community can hold you responsible for the CDA that has been signed. But if you are carrying out exploration, you are excused by law, by the provision of the Mining Act, that you have to have a 3 years minimal period to complete your exploration. But if you need an extension, you need to finish that. And because the government had, and the ministry have put up a structure to monitor the appropriate exploration being conducted by the companies in the field, the companies are held at every point in time. If for any reason that they cannot find resources enough to sustain my operations for any lifespan, and they want to withdraw, they will have to correct the environmental impact which they have created. But if the company have the fund, the muscle to be able to complete the exploration to its logical conclusion, then at the point of the design of the mine and the mining has commenced operation fully, that is the appropriate time as provided by the law for the host community to demand for the CSR. And then to now implement whatever agreement has been put in place in the MDA. Thank you. I mean the CDA. Thank you.
Can I come in, please?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
And there are many other
Yes,
questions.
I want to thank my Oga, our husband, Mr. Ojeka, but I want to disagree with you because Mr. Ojeka, you are my husband, but we will divorce. We will separate temporarily here and go and reconcile. You see, the truth of it is that in Nigeria, we are always too eager, you understand, to want to show results because the period to be a minister, to be a political office holder is always so short. The moment you are tampering with the environment, we all schooled one time or the other abroad. You know that even there are some forests you can't go and hunt in Canada, in America. You can't even bring out a tree. The tree will fall down and it will rot in that place. You can't take it out. The moment you touch anything in an ecosystem, you should be ready for a kind of compensation. So we have to look at our act very well and make sure we come up with best international practices. We should not be too eager to want to satisfy vendors, investors who wants to come into the system. There are ponds you cannot go and fish. You only fish once in a year or once in a mating season. So these are things we have to look into. The environment is very critical. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that information.
I don't know whether I missed that is, I would say that, well, if we are looking at the international best practices, and in ADMA, you are very, very aware and conversant with the fact that government and the ministry have been attracting contributions from the global mining destinations so as to come out with a very cogent and applicable document. But of course, there is no law that is sacrosanct forever. So every law is then amenable to review. And I think you have opportunity to crave for that so that it can be inserted when that document is presented to stakeholders. But of course, I'm only just saying what is contained in the law. And if we have to question that, we'll wait until we have opportunity to review it. And that's the way I look at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For panelists, there are questions in the chat box. If you can just take a look at them and respond. We have a few more minutes to respond, and then we'll turn it over, I believe, to Kingsley to close the meeting, to maybe make some other announcements. So please look at the chat box. There are questions about, I see a question here about, I'm seeing a lot of questions still on some on the other panel. I hope I'm looking at the right chat box. Well, some of the questions are actually for Neiti, but this one: can education and technology be indigenously developed and directed at the communities? I think that's a question that any panelist can address. What are the barriers to establishing intermediate production facilities in the communities? These are some of the questions that are in the chat box. In the Q&A box, there's a complaint there that I believe is mostly about the oil sector that maybe Neiti will take up, about the oil company that is devastating communities in Anambra State. That should be addressed. Otherwise, I think the two questions I'm seeing is about how do we develop intermediate technologies that our miners can utilize, and the education in that sector. So
I'll want to give a response to that. I think it should be a combination. We should expose our young persons more to technology. It's very, very important. Now that we even have the internet, people get to learn what is going on in other places. And also, we should recognize that there are innate ability. There are technology that will grow from the environment. I've seen that happens even during a project, that the project got somebody from outside of Nigeria to come and teach fishermen, for instance, about fishing, from using information from other countries. But surprisingly, the resource person who came was also able to learn from the local people how to adapt local technologies. So we shouldn't think that it's one size fits all, that because something is from abroad or from external, that it is more valuable than what we have here. I think we should find a way to synergize, to make sure, to look at what is happening. And we also have instances that some of the things that are being produced in China, if you go to Alaba market or some of these Nigerian markets, you see our local people, indigenous, are providing indigenous or innovative equipment that suits the environment. I think we must find a way to merge ideas. That's my own. While we expose our children through internet to what is happening, build their capacity to be able to use the tools that other people outside are using. That is very, very important. We must integrate that into the education system. We must provide access to them, having knowledge that is globally available, even as we also recognize that they also have some value to add from their local environment.
Thank you very much for that. I fully agree with you. There are local indigenous technologies that need to be upgraded or adapted. We can not just ignore them, not just in the mining sector, but for other things, other areas. And thank you also, Mrs. Ademoku, for reminding us of the Zamfara tragedy where we lost so many children some years ago. If participants can just download the books that have been launched today, presented today, the one on mining shows a mining situation where wastewater is being pumped from mines, and the community people are collecting that water for portable use. Workers are washing in the same water, and the same location people are fetching the water. I mean, this is very heartbreaking and requires emergency response. It requires action to make sure that people are not exposed to such toxic situations.
Sorry, the moderator, if I could just also respond to the question on barriers.
Right.
Yeah, I think our institutions also, our culture, our way of life, constitute some form of barriers, to our development. You talked about Zamfara. I could recall that the experts who came, to even make the assumption that these children may have died from lead poisoning, came from the CDC in the US. But that's not even the story. The story is that they were not able to have a determination of the cause of death because of religious beliefs. In that part of the country that, the children are dead, they are buried, you cannot, do some postmortem, on them. So we from the intangible, we should also look, at the, tangibles. We must find a way to educate. Education is very, very important. And it's important that this sector invest in education of the communities, in creating awareness about issues.
Moderator, please, for this, before you close, I have to address what the last speaker has just said, that the cause of death of children in Zamfara in 2010 was determined. That is why it was specifically targeted at lead poisoning. And since that discovery, Mercy Sans Frontiers, Doctors Without Borders, have established their center in Zamfara, precisely to now continue to mediate and treat the children or whoever is impacted negatively. And when there was a reoccurrence in Niger State, all the children who were impacted negatively in Niger State were taken to that center in Zamfara and treated. Through chelation, they were chelated and they were treated. And the center is still there. So now, but then, what led to the lead poisoning level? It was that miners who were trying, artisanal miners who were trying to shield their production from their colleagues, decided to take the ore into their homes to use local cooking utensils to process. And aside from that, the milling machine that was be used to mill the ore was equally sided within the precinct of the community. And therefore, the dust that arises from the dry milling took a lot of ore, lead, into the environment too. So you can now see that homes that have children or toddlers crawling, children who are crawling, naturally anything from ground is to the mouth, were now eating the lead. They were drinking from surface water that is already polluted, an environment that is already overwhelmed with the same spillage. And of course, biologically, when the level of acceptability of lead in the system is overshared, it will now lead to the calamities that we got.
Thank you.
And I think the effort of government has straightened that. We have not had any common issues of that repeating itself. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I would summarize from that is that it's a systemic failure. I wouldn't blame the victim.
Yes. Yeah.
They failed those people. Politicians only go there to put posters when it's time for election. They won't provide anything.
Of course, definitely. Yeah.
So at this point, I hope Honorable Mrs. Adeyemi, I believe do you have a word to say? Otherwise, I'm turning it over to Kingsley and to Neiti to round up and give us some more information. I don't see. Yeah, thank you so much. So that's the panel on the impacts of mining, and that the impact continues, and we hope to halt it through Neiti's effort and other efforts.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Architect Nimo Basi. Very well handled and very useful comments and interventions by the panelists, as well as the responses to the issues that were raised. Once again, we'd like to appreciate the moderator of the session just ended, Architect Nimo Basi, and the panelists, Honorable Mrs. Janet Adeyemi, Mr. O.P. Ojeka, who is the Director in the Ministry of Mines and Steel Development, and Mrs. Foluke Ademoku for your insights on what's happening in the mining sector as well as its impact. Just before we get into the concluding segments of this webinar, I'd like to indicate that one or two things. The report that has just been launched talks about the impact, but mostly from the socio-economic perspective. Then listening to the tailpiece of the contributions a while ago, that's the lead poisoning that occurred in Zamfara. That's a place called Bagega, I recall that I was there some years ago. But there's scope, therefore, for additional studies on the health implications of mining activities. And it's clear that what we are dealing with also at this stage is mostly small scale and artisanal mining. So what happens when the big players come? I've heard of complaints by potential big players in the mining subsector that the degradation of the environment can actually impede the kind of activities that they ordinarily would like to undertake. So there's a greater scope for more studies, but what we have in our hands is essentially useful and also taken off from the contributions that we had from the floor. So on that note, we'd like to thank everybody who's been part of today's program. There are some questions that have been asked. If you take a look at the chat column, you will find the responses there. Now, the reports are already available online, and the links have been provided in the chat segment of this webinar. So you can take a look at that. On my screen is on the right side, slightly somewhere there below. Just scroll up and down. You'll get the links for the reports. And somebody also was asking how they could get the IDs of participants at this webinar, more especially the panelists. That has also been provided along with the names of the moderators and their affiliation. Once again, a deep appreciation to the keynote speaker and reports reviewer, Dr. Tive Igbuzo, and of course, Nimo Basi and the other panelists who've been party to this. Now, there was a requirement for registration for this webinar, and that requirement would necessitate you providing your email address. So in terms of accessing the presentation by the keynote speaker, as well as the recording of this webinar, your email address will be very valuable. Assuming you didn't use the email address in recording and you just joined, please kindly forward your contacts, and then that will be utilized in sending the accounts and detailed reports to your address. Now, before we wrap up finally, earlier, if you recall, we had these audio glitches. I'd like to once again apologize. And it turns out that some of those who were very clear probably were in the core areas of service provision, and the others were in the penumbra, that's to say the periphery, and that's why we had so much distortion. But still, that didn't detract from the quality of your presentation and indeed interaction. Earlier, if you recall, we were trying to get the executive secretary to formally present the reports. I saw him a while ago on the pop-up. Let me just minimize. All right, so that's right. It's next to me there. So I want to now respectfully invite the executive secretary to formally present these two reports, something that we had left out earlier, and then we'll call it a day and time on this webinar. Mr. Waziri Adio.
Okay, thank you very much. There are two reports. The first one is on the impact of mining on women, youth, and others in selected communities in Nigeria. This is a report of 108 pages. So this is it. We also have the second one on the perception of the impact of 13% oil derivation allocation. This is 186 pages. So these are the two reports. I hereby present them to all participants and to all Nigerians, and hope that these reports will be read, and they will not just end on the shelves, and they will lead to action. We have started a conversation here, and we hope that the conversation continues. The reports are already on our website. Please go to the website www.neiti.gov.ng, and there's a section where you see our policy papers. Click on it. You see a drop down, and it goes to occasional paper series. You have the one for policy briefs, you have the one for quarterly reviews, and the one for occasional paper series. Click on it, 7 and 8. You can download them from the website. The links, the short links, have also been shared on Twitter. Yeah, they will be shared on other social media networks too, and also I've shared it in the chat box. Somebody said the links are broken. We'll look into that. So you can just click on that, and it takes you straight to downloading the document. We're also going to have hard copies. So those who are interested in hard copies can send us their address, and we'll be able to. So I want to thank everybody again. It started on a rocky note because of the challenge with technology. And trust me, or believe me on this, we had all kinds of backup plans. Unfortunately, they all, if you see the strong room where Mr. Kingsley and others are, there are like 3 modems from service providers, including the one that we have, which is supposed to be a broadband, but at the same time, we want to thank you for staying through the course. We see more than 100 participants at this stage, despite all the glitches that we had at the beginning. So I want to thank everyone for staying through with us. It shows your interest, and your commitment to these issues. And it's because of COVID-19 that we're doing a virtual dialogue. The original plan was to have a series of dialogues, including going to the communities. All the things that people have said about sensitizing the communities, building their capacities, for engagement, for advocacy. We have plans for all of that. And all the things that people have said about inclusive decision-making, participatory decision-making, those are things that are also very high, on our agenda. Yes, please take time to read this report. There was a comment by Mr. Enimo Bassi. Please look at this report. We decided to go beyond profits by companies and payments to government. And we decided to look at the impact on people and impact on the planet. So all the issues that people have spoken about here have actually been looked at in terms of not just.
So, it looks like the devil is back. Just, all right, he's cleared up now.
So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this. This is just the beginning of the conversation. Let the conversation continue. Thank you so much. Wish you all the best. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mr. Waziri Adio, Executive Secretary of Neiti, for the closing comments on this webinar. We've done just about an hour extra to the time we had delimited for this webinar, but it's been time very well spent. We appreciate Innocent Chukuma of Ford Foundation, who gave a goodwill message, and Dr. Tipe Buzo, we earlier said, the panelists, and my co-moderator, Nibo Bassi. And to all of you out there, we'd like to appreciate you. And just, this is not a by the way comment, so that it's not taken as if we didn't quite value what was being done. There is a Chris Azo who sent in a torrent of messages on operations of an oil company around the Anambra and Delta axis. Nibo Bassi referenced that, but I think that Mr. Azo, you can also take a bearing from some of the recommendations made by the panelists. Use the media, let the communities also speak for themselves. Where the voices are lacking, you have to build capacity. But there are a number of issues that, of course, that you can take up with the relevant authorities. On that note, once again, I'd like to appreciate everyone. Thank you for being part of this memorable event. I'm Kingsley Osadolo. See you some other time.